An 8-year-old boy developed a fascination with guns. His oldest brother, upon seeing this, slapped him hard and shouted, "You little brat, what are you doing touching a gun?" The boy replied defiantly, "But I'm a street kid too." He was the youngest member of a gang of petty thieves. They mostly targeted gas delivery trucks, but the money they made was barely worth it. The boy confidently claimed he had a new business idea and urged the others to follow him. However, in a place ruled by street codes, a kid like him had no voice. "You little punk, still growing hair and already giving orders." But then something unexpected happened. The eldest brother actually accepted the boy's bold suggestion to rob luxury love hotels, places frequented by the wealthy. But since the boy was too young, his older brother didn't let him join the action, assigning him to keep watch outside. That turned out to be his biggest mistake. The boy's idea wasn't without merit, because those who visited the hotel were usually having secret affairs. No one dared to call the police. The three older guys quickly gathered a large sum of money. Suddenly, a loud glass-shattering sound came from outside. Thinking it was the police, they fled in a panic. But strangely, the boy who was supposed to be on lookout had vanished. Gunshots kept ringing out. They hijacked the car and escaped in a frenzy. They never suspected it was the boy who deliberately caused the noise. As soon as the three brothers were gone, the boy turned into a ruthless force and entered the hotel. "What are you doing?" "Man, you already robbed us. What more do you want?" Dozens of people in the hotel were mysteriously found lifeless. The boy wasn't after money. It was all for his twisted pleasure. His gaze was cold, with no hint of remorse or empathy. Only pure malice radiated from within. Today, I'd like to introduce you to a hard-hitting crime film that was banned in several countries. City of God. The reason it was blacklisted is because its content is brutally realistic. The children shown in the film were actual members of real-life gangs. It's hard to believe that such a massive film was made on a modest $3.3 million budget. You can tell how the crew had to stretch every dollar to the max. Even infamous gang leaders had to walk around town on foot, not even a clunky car to their name. Looking back at the entire film, the number of cars shown can be counted on one hand. The deeper reason was that, at the time, buying a car was heavily restricted. Prices were sky high, while the film crew was on a tight budget. The boy's name was Zé Pequeno, born and raised in the largest slum of Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, a place plagued year-round by violence and crime. No one dreamed of college. The only dream here was to become a gang leader. This place was known as the land forgotten by God, and that's where the name City of God comes from. Zé Pequeno always looked up to and followed a trio of teenage outlaws. They were the ones who ruled the City of God in its early days. One of them was named Caballero. The trio was famous for boldly hijacking gas delivery trucks. But they had a bit of Robin Hood in them, always sharing their loot with the poor. So, the struggling locals were always grateful to them. Whenever the police showed up, the whole neighborhood helped cover for them. The teenage trio followed one unspoken rule: only take money, never hurt anyone. Their robberies were just a means to save up enough to escape this living nightmare. But with such small-scale heists, the dream of a better life always seemed out of reach. Zé Pequeno, though still young, was remarkably clever. He knew that robbing people required not just courage, but also a cool head and smart planning. That's why those older boys ended up falling for Zé Pequeno's deadly trap, just like the film's opening scene. The massacre at the hotel left many dead, making them the perfect scapegoats. The case shocked the city. Police launched a full-scale manhunt for the teenage trio. In a car accident, Alicat injured his left leg. Caballero, loyal to the end, opened fire to distract the police so his friends could escape. Once again, the locals of the slum helped hide them. They almost made it out, but among the locals was a man known as the Dwarf, a secret informant for the police. He revealed the trio's hideout in the woods. 2 officers tracked them deep into the forest. But their goal wasn't to serve justice. They planned to steal the heist money and erase the witnesses. Eliminating them won't matter. It's not against the rules anyway. That was how those officers thought. And that's the real reason crime kept thriving in that area. The cops were even more corrupt than the thieves. Alicat and Bay Bintin Ho, hiding in a tree, overheard everything. The darkness in people's hearts seemed to awaken Alicat overnight. By morning, despite the risk of being caught, he limped back to the church to confess, determined to leave the street life behind. Ironically, just as he was letting go of everything, a moment that felt like divine intervention occurred. The police had no suspicion of Alicat, but the timid boy walking behind him wasn't so lucky. He was tragically shot by mistake. The police realized he wasn't one of the 3 robbers. But instead of showing remorse, they searched his body, stuffed a gun in his hand, and fired a shot to make it look like self-defense. Once again, Alicat narrowly escaped death. Elsewhere, Caballero hid at his girlfriend's house. He swore he only stole money and never fired a shot, and he had no idea who killed those people. No one would ever suspect that the real killer was an 8-year-old boy like Zé Pequeno. Zé Pequeno roamed free. He now began to show his unusual talent for crime. He brought another boy named Benny to a wealthy neighborhood to shine shoes. When people took off their shoes, they let their guard down. That was the perfect moment to strike. Working together, the 2 quickly earned their first large sum of money, much faster than the trio had made hijacking gas trucks. Once things calmed down, Babintin Ho returned home, determined to turn over a new leaf and help his father sell fish. But his habit of stealing hadn't gone away. He had an affair with the wife of the dwarf, the man who had ratted them out. Karma came quickly. That day, the dwarf caught them red-handed in bed. but Bin Tin Ho panicked so badly he ran off without even putting on his pants. Unable to catch Ba Bin Tin Ho, the dwarf ended up taking his anger out on his wife, burying her body in the yard. But the noise he made alerted the neighbors. He was reported and sent to prison. One genius aspect of this film is how everything comes full circle. You'll understand in just a moment. Meanwhile, Caballera promised his girlfriend they'd run away together. Even though the dream of leaving the city of God had already crumbled, he still hoped for a second chance in another world. So they stole a car, but the driver panicked and couldn't start the engine. Caballera had to get out and push. At that exact moment, he witnessed the dwarf being arrested. The dwarf's chance to redeem himself had arrived. You want to catch a thief, right? He's over there. Go get him quickly. As Caballera pushed the car, thinking happiness was within reach, a gunshot rang out behind it. Caballera knew there was no turning back. He could only hope his girlfriend would escape this place of crime, so he led the police in another direction to give her a chance. In the end, he was gunned down on the road out of the city, just one step away from freedom. It all happened just like before. The police immediately searched him and took all his money, and the one who benefited most was none other than the photographer. This was golden material for the front page, a juicy scoop. Caballera had served his final purpose in life. Ironically, the desensitized residents of the City of God watched like passive spectators. No one cared whether he had been wrongly killed or not, because in the City of God, a human life meant no more than a chicken. In fact, a day earlier, after fleeing the dwarf's house, Ba Bin Tin Ho had run into his younger brother. His brother's name was Buscape, the third-person narrator of the entire film. Ba Bin Tin Ho forced his brother to give him his pants, and vanished without a trace. The truth was, during his escape, he had run into Zepekano and Benny. The three gang leaders were all on the run, while the missing kid was peacefully hiding here, and had even gathered a pile of money. Ba Bin Tin Ho arrogantly grabbed the cash, ready to disappear for good. But little did he know, Zepekano was no longer the same kid. Zepekano shouted his name coldly and shot him on the spot. The era of the teenage trio had ended. Zepekano alone unleashed a wave of terrifying bloodshed. His path reeked of death, eventually. When he turned 18 together with Benny, they eliminated everyone in their way and successfully took control of the City of God. He became someone everyone feared. One day, a guy failed to notice his presence. Immediately, a slap like thunder landed across his face. The small, unimpressive man was named Shaggy. Later on, he would become a key figure in this story. Zepekano relished the feeling of power and fear that came with it. That's why, even as a kid, he had dreamed of replacing the teenage trio. It showed just how deep his hunger for power ran. He went to a spiritual healer and gave himself a bold new name. From now on, I am Zepekano. As Zepekano, his ambition became bottomless. Petty robberies no longer satisfied him. He craved flashy cars, shiny gold watches, and beautiful women surrounding the top bosses. Benny worried and asked, "How can we deal in weapons if we don't have capital?" Zepekano answered coldly and bluntly, "We'll wipe them out and take over directly." And so, a new wave of violence began. Kill, kill, and kill, until no one dared to stand in his way. He quickly swallowed up the city's entire black market trade. Only one dealer named Galena was lucky enough to survive, because he was Benny's close friend. Even though Zepekano wanted to seize all of Galena's empire, he had to show restraint out of respect for Benny, his most trusted ally, and Galena would later become his most dangerous enemy. After taking over the territory, Zepekano began operating like a seasoned crime boss. He knew that to succeed, he first had to bribe the police, so they would turn a blind eye to his operations. From then on, he controlled both the underworld and law enforcement. His network ran smoothly and without resistance. Once the supply chain was fully established, the City of God entered a new era of unprecedented control. The entire city was clouded in narcotic smoke. No one thought about petty theft anymore. The poor not only found peace, but even earned a bit of money through this trade. That's why Zepekano was seen as a hero in their eyes. And with that praise, he was immensely pleased. He felt like his ancestors were finally honored. Recently, he heard about a group of young punks stirring up trouble in Galena's territory. They were smashing things, robbing places, and seriously disrupting the so-called peace and order of the City of God. Zepekano couldn't just sit back and let that happen. Otherwise, his title as boss of the City of God would mean nothing. It reminded him of a news story during the pandemic. The government was helpless, so the gangs took matters into their own hands and locked down the city. He warned Galena to get rid of those kids, but Galena never saw him as someone to be respected. To Galena, he was a major rival, and of course, he didn't listen. Since Galena didn't act, Zepekano had to step in himself. Coincidentally, the kids were loudly dreaming out loud, "I'll take down Zepekano. I'll be the next boss," but as soon as they saw him, they scattered in fear. The ones who didn't run wet themselves in fear, losing all their earlier bravado. To send a message, Zepekano forced one kid to take out another. From then on, the kids officially submitted to him, but this planted the seeds of trouble for him later. In truth, over the years, it had always been Benny supporting Zepekano in the shadows. The two brothers, one handled things inside, the other outside. Unlike Zepekano's arrogance and temper, Benny was calm, diplomatic, and open-hearted. That's why he was known as the kindest outlaw in the City of God. He always knew how to act with decency. Many times, Benny had to clean up the messes Zepekano created. That was also why Zay Pequeno never let go of him. However, Benny's life goals were totally different from Zay Pequeno's. One day, he met a well-dressed boy and even tried to copy his bicycle style to make friends. When a gang boss wants to be your friend, who would say no? What Benny really admired was the boy's sense of fashion. So Benny eagerly gave him money and asked him to buy the trendiest clothes. Thanks to that boy, he joined a whole new social circle with real friends, like any normal person. He even got a beautiful girlfriend from that moment. His life turned a new page. But to Zay Pequeno, all that trendy stuff was a waste of time. So he couldn't help but mock him coldly. Tension slowly started to grow between the two. Recently, one of the underlings killed someone in Zay Pequeno's territory. That made him paranoid all day, afraid the guy would someday take over his spot. He wanted to eliminate him, but Benny thought it was too extreme. Without asking, Benny secretly let the guy go. Zay Pequeno was furious, scolding Benny for being soft, raising a snake in your sleeve, but Benny calmly replied, "You should get yourself a girlfriend, man." Zay Pequeno didn't understand what that meant to him. The word girlfriend was almost taboo. With such different life goals, the distance between the two brothers grew. Benny was in love and lost interest in the weapons business. His girlfriend suggested they leave the city of God and start a new life elsewhere. To Benny, joining a gang had always just been a way to survive. Love and peace were his real dreams. So he didn't even ask Zay Pequeno for permission. He decided to throw a grand retirement party. Friends from the streets and the fashion world all came to see him off. It was a massive party few could afford to throw. It showed just how well connected Benny was. But Zay Pequeno sat gloomily, like a lost soul. He blamed everything losing his most trusted partner on Benny's girlfriend. "Are you really throwing all this away for that woman? She's not just any woman, she's my woman. I'll take Galena's operation and give it to you. Don't mess with Galena, he's a good guy." "Zay, you hate everyone. I have to go. I love you, but I've had enough of this violence." Zay Pequeno was furious. Seeing others happy only fueled his rage. At that moment, a young man was dancing happily with his girlfriend. Zay had found someone to unleash his anger on. He forced the guy to strip and dance in front of everyone. That young man was none other than Shaggy, the same guy he had randomly slapped before. Shaggy, too scared to fight back, just lowered his head in shame. Next, Zay Pequeno took a camera that Benny had just gifted to another friend. That friend was none other than the younger brother of Ba Bin Tin Ho, one of the original teenage trio, the one Zay Pequeno had killed, and also the third-person narrator of this entire story. The strobe lights flashed wildly. In his madness, Zay didn't recognize anyone. Someone in the crowd had already decided Zay Pequeno must die. But the flashing lights were too bright, and the shooter's poor aim. The bullet didn't hit Zay Pequeno. It tragically struck Benny instead. Zay Pequeno had just been mad at Benny, but seeing his lifelong brother take the hit sent him into shock. Cruel fate, the shooter was the very underling Zay had wanted to kill. But Benny had stopped him and let him go. That cruel twist of fate came back to Benny instead. After shooting Benny, the assassin went to seek refuge with Zay Pequeno's arch-enemy Galena, but Galena completely rejected him. "You killed the best man in the city of Gaul. Let's go. Take down Zay Pequeno together." The guy didn't realize that Benny was the person Galena respected the most. Still, the guilt for Benny's death now fell squarely on Galena. Zay Pequeno immediately gathered his crew and went looking for revenge. But on the way, he came across Shaggy passionately kissing his girlfriend. Bad luck kept piling on. Zay Pequeno snapped again. In front of Shaggy, he assaulted the girl. Even after leaving, he still didn't feel satisfied. Wait, why didn't I finish him off? So he went back to Shaggy's place and opened fire wildly. He killed Shaggy's younger brother, father, and girlfriend. Shaggy hid under the table, barely holding on to life. But Zay Pequeno didn't know this time. He'd messed with the wrong guy. Shaggy had once been a top marksman in the military. After retiring, he lived quietly as a bus driver. But now he'd been pushed to the edge. Right then, Galena appeared to check out the chaos and threw Shaggy a gun. If you're a man, there's only so much you can endure. With his expert shooting skills, Shaggy took down one of Zay Pequeno's closest men. Street thugs are no match for trained soldiers. Zay's crew quickly scattered. But Zay Pequeno wasn't one to give up. Enraged, he put a bounty across the city for Shaggy's capture. No matter how skilled Shaggy was, he could only hide and run. That's when Galena recognized Shaggy's special abilities, and they both shared a common enemy. Shaggy never wanted to be a criminal, but Galena's relentless persuasion wore him down. In the end, he joined Galena in deadly heists and revenge missions. Recently, Zay Pequeno lost Benny, his greatest strategist. Now there was no one to restrain his violent nature. He quickly lost the people's support. People no longer remembered his past favors, and many of his men had defected to Galena's side. Galena's forces had once been weaker, but now they were evenly matched. A bloody war was inevitable, plunging the entire city into chaos. During a clash, Shaggy was ambushed and arrested by the police. The very next day, he was featured on the front page of the newspapers. When Zay Pequeno saw Shaggy on TV, a man who had never known humility, he couldn't sit still. He was supposed to be the boss of the city of God, yet the headlines didn't mention him at all. How could that be acceptable? So he sought out Buscape, the kid he once knocked down 4 years later. Buscape dreamed of being a photographer and now worked as an errand boy at a newspaper. Getting to work for Zé Pequeno felt like a dream come true for him. Every day, he was tasked with taking cool photos of Zé Pequeno and his crew. One day, he secretly took the film back to the office to develop, not expecting a female coworker to publish it without asking. And it made the front page, a hot scoop straight from inside the city of God. Something newspapers had wanted for years, but never managed to get. No journalist had dared to enter the underworld for. Now, such a story had surfaced, it was priceless. But Buscapé was terrified. He feared the leak would get him killed by Zé Pequeno. He angrily confronted his coworker. She not only offered him payment, but encouraged him to take more photos to make more money. The newspaper even gave him a new camera and promoted him to a trainee reporter. With money and a job he loved, Buscapé gladly accepted. To help him gather more material, the reporter even brought Buscapé to her home, all in the name of art. What Buscapé didn't expect was that Zé Pequeno had no complaints at all. Getting on the front page was his dream. Finally, they all know I'm the real boss. The next morning, Zé Pequeno proudly carried stacks of newspapers to show off his glory. Meanwhile, Galina's people secretly rescued Shaggy from the hospital. Shaggy was back. The showdown between the two gangs had finally reached its climax. Since losing Benny, Zé Pequeno's operations had gone downhill. He was so broke he couldn't afford weapons. So, he pulled the same old trick, robbing an arms dealer without paying. He didn't know that the boss behind that dealer was actually the police. Zé Pequeno was about to stir up serious trouble. On the day of the final battle, he handed out guns to kids who'd never fired one. These were the same kids he had recruited earlier to fight Galina. Each of them was overjoyed and full of pride. After lining them up, Zé Pequeno told Buscapé to take a badass group photo. Just as they struck a pose, Shaggy burst out and fired the first shot. The battle had officially begun. In an instant, Buscapé became a war correspondent. Any photo he took could become tomorrow's front page headline. Compared to Shaggy's well-trained squad, Zé Pequeno's crew didn't last a second, they quickly scattered. But Shaggy's glory lasted only moments. He was suddenly hit by a stray bullet. It all traced back to a robbery he once joined with Galina. He had taken the life of a bank employee who turned out to be this young man's father. This time, Shaggy's luck ran out. Karma came quickly. Both sides suffered heavy losses. The police stormed in to clean up the aftermath. Galina was arrested on the spot, and Zé Pequeno was secretly taken away. In a quiet alley, the cops took all of Zé Pequeno's money and let him go. They released him because he had nothing left, no use to them anymore. Then a group of kids came looking for Zé Pequeno. He still tried to order them to regroup, but he didn't expect those very kids to aim the guns he had given them at him. The tables had turned, it was their turn to rule. And just like that, a once feared kingpin was no more. Buscapé took one last close-up shot, sealing his own future. Zé Pequeno's face appeared on the front page again, but this time, as the end of his story, the paper officially promoted Buscapé to full-time journalist. From there, he left the city of God. Zé Pequeno was gone, but violence remained. Kids roamed the streets with guns, threatening to take lives. They had become the new Zé Pequenos. Gangs shuffled. A new cycle began. The city of God remained a forsaken land. Poverty isn't the root of evil. It's the darkness in people's hearts that leads to self-destruction. When the police no longer represent justice, and people stop believing in honest work, then the city of God has no God. Violence becomes the only belief. Some people try to make money through crime to escape the city of God, but they don't realize they've been in a deadly game from the start. Anyone who enters this world will eventually pay the price. A film's value lies in its legacy. A review's value lies in its perspective. That's the end of today's story. Thank you for watching. What did you think of the film? Leave your comments below.